Hello attendees, welcome and thank you for joining me for today. My goal is that through this 30-minute webinar presentation, you take with you some ideas to proactively and strategically plan for your organization's HR compliance in 2021. We have a lot to cover, so I will provide you with a way to get in touch with me at the end of the presentation. Before we get into the content, allow me to introduce myself and my role with Ahola. My name is Corinne Saliba, and I am a senior certified HR practitioner and two-time graduate of Baldwin Wallace University. It was there I earned both my bachelor's and master's in human resources management. My passion for human capital management and the people side of business started in 2010, and I pursued HR in several industries across Northeast Ohio. As of this presentation, I've been with Ahola Payroll and HR Solutions for nearly a year and a half, and it is my pleasure to coach and consult with small business clients in several states regarding their HR initiatives and compliance concerns. I currently serve Ahola as an HR consultant for our proactive HR division, where I advise our clients on many of the topics we'll discuss today. Now for some background on Ahola. I can assume that if you're attending, you're familiar with the organization. But if by chance you are not, the Ahola Corporation is a 53-year-old family-owned company in Brecksville, Ohio. Since 1967, we've expanded our service offerings from payroll processing to include several human capital management platforms and HR consulting that allow our clients to focus on running their businesses and leaving the compliance management to us. In fall 2019, Ahola updated our company branding, which included a new slogan. It's more than just keeping you in business, that's maintaining. Ahola confidently moves you forward. The addition of Ahola's new slogan resonates with my role as an HR consultant because it explains the value that holistic HR management brings to your business. Proactive HR solutions not only alleviate the burden of figuring out HR stuff on the fly, it also establishes your business for best HR practices. Therefore, as a small business owner, you get your time back in your day to focus on your bottom line. Now let's talk about what we're seeing as current trending organizational concerns. As much as we're feeling burnt out by COVID-19 this year and all of the implications of the virus, the reality is that coronavirus has changed and will continue to shift priorities for 2021. On this slide, you'll see some common challenges employers are facing as surveyed by the Society of Human Resource Management, or SHRM. Reflect on these challenges throughout the presentation today. Are they aligned with what your organization is working to resolve? How will they impact your HR strategy for the upcoming year? As an HR consultant, the questions I'm most frequently asked are, am I doing this right, or can I do this? There was already so much pressure for small business owners to navigate HR, but of course, COVID-19 has increased that anxiety tenfold. I'm hoping though that as we talk through this conversation today, that we relieve some of that anxiety and we'll progress throughout some of the topics in our conversation. So how do small businesses manage HR? Here are some fascinating statistics. 54% of small business owners looking to save money will handle employment matters on their own. Conversely, 74% of business owners in the 5 to 49 employee count range have very little HR management experience, if any. So you can see why navigating 2020 was so difficult. Again, my goal this afternoon is to help you look beyond the unprecedented year that was 2020 and get us thinking about what 2021 has in store for all things human resources. I want you to feel prepared and ready to take on a successful year. Now, with that said, HR can be somewhat of a subjective topic and hard to envision at times. So this graphic was made by our marketing team to help us visualize some of the areas within human resources administration. We'll delve into this graphic in the 4 categories, which are compliance, recruiting and hiring, workplace regulations and safety, and managing employees. Internally, our proactive HR consulting division uses these 4 categories to explain the facets of HR to our clients. And as you can see in the graphic, HR is a cyclical topic, so they all flow into one another. We'll touch on each of the 4 categories as we move through the content today. First up, compliance. Without a doubt, it's the category that brings most of you here and definitely took center stage in 2020. Even though it's just one of the 4 categories, it's arguably the most important because it affects all of our decision making. We'll navigate through considerations regarding compliance that will dictate the upcoming year. First, we saw the FFCRA, or the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, signed into effect by our president in April. Under this regulation, all employers under the 50 employee count mark were told that a mandatory FFCRA posting was required to be placed in a communal area for visibility of employees. This posting is technically only effective until December 31st, but the virus has obviously persisted, so we will have to monitor what comes next. It is highly unlikely for the FFCRA to expire in the peak of coronavirus cases. The mandatory posting describes the expanded leave protections and employee rights. As an employer, it is so crucial for you to understand who is eligible for a leave of absence under the FFCRA. As we see cases spike and more schools start to close, the leave requests will likely increase as well. Please do yourself a favor and familiarize yourself with the Act if you haven't done so already. Here is an example of what the mandatory posting looks like. Again, be on the lookout for any DOL updates so that way you do not have an expired posting visible in your lunchroom, or for remote employees that are accessing your employee self-service website, that they're not looking at an expired posting in January. Note that if an employee tells you that he or she has been confirmed positive for COVID-19, you must send a communication to your workforce. It is also your responsibility to notify and quarantine anyone who came in contact with a positive case while maintaining confidentiality of protected information, such as who was diagnosed. When you put someone on a leave or quarantine them, make sure you're documenting it appropriately for DOL and IRS purposes. In a previous 10-Minute Tuesday webinar, we discussed the FFCRA. I encourage you to visit our blog to download the document, the FFCRA Employee Rights document, and to listen to the recording from that 10-Minute Tuesday. It should provide you with more detail as to who qualifies for expanded leaves and what you as the employer can do to properly document those leaves. And the beauty of it is that the 10-Minute Tuesdays were only 10 minutes, so please give it a quick listen. On the topic of compliance, it goes without saying that as we shift into new federal political leadership, changing to administration is inevitable. Under the Biden administration, it'll be very interesting to see what the president-elect will choose to do as he builds his COVID task force. In addition to COVID-19, I can only predict that we will see more work taking place with pay equity regulations and a return to the pro-labor agenda that was the hallmark of the National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, under the Obama administration. We also know that Biden will continue the ACA and its legacy, depending on what the Supreme Court's verdict is pending. And then we'll also have to stay tuned to what all this means in months to come. But the ACA is not going anywhere. As an employer, the best practice would be to surround yourself with knowledgeable advisors and resources to help you stay abreast to any changes. Ahola is certainly here for you to support, and including any significant changes to the FLSA or Fair Labor Standards Act, and it'll probably be posted on our blog and website. Of course, the most likely change we'll see will be updates to come with the minimum wage in January. Now let's move into our category 2, or recruiting and hiring. Fortunately or unfortunately, this category, of course, is also heavily impacted by COVID-19. So let's see how. One, changes to the hiring process. Previous to March, unemployment was at a historic low and sat around 3%. At the peak of our shutdown, we were witnessing a record high of about 16%. More recently, I've seen us at around 6.5% nationwide. Obviously, with spikes and the possibility of another shutdown, it is overwhelming to think about, and it's not exactly the easiest to predict when workforce planning or budgeting. What we learned about the shutdown is that virtual and shorter hiring processes saw a wide adoption during the pandemic, and they're probably here to stay. Here's what changed. The lack of face-to-face interaction due to public health measures. In addition to the impact of the pandemic on the job market, our work environments may look completely different now. Because a lot of us aren't commuting to work and seeing for hire signs on our commute, social media is now the best way to recruit. In addition, some employers have gotten creative and even done virtual group hiring events. Depending on your industry and seasonality, you're either ramping up for hire, freezing open positions, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle. Just trying to stay agile is probably going to be your key right now. Regardless of where you are, still plan on having the groundwork and working in as much virtual or phone interviews as possible. Some candidates will even expect it. So be ready to talk about the precautions with COVID with candidates. 2, virtual onboarding. If you're virtually hiring someone, it is very likely that you'll need to consider how to virtually onboard them as well. If, gosh forbid, we do head into another shutdown, or we do have to limit the amount of people at the work or office site, having a cloud-based onboarding and file storage system is so crucial. We'll continue to see employees and candidates ask for virtual accommodations, be it for safety or preference. Again, I urge you to limit face-to-face interactions as much as possible, such as when you're having your new hire orientations. Plus, having a cloud-based software is a great way to keep your life organized, especially when it comes to I-9 storage. Note that the Department of Homeland Security did make some changes to the I-9 process. You can familiar yourself with these changes by visiting the article that was dedicated on the blog. Improper I-9 storage is such a costly fine if you're audited. All right, now let's move into the hiring, or let's move from hiring and recruiting of employees to retention of those employees. First, we'll start with some statistics. 7 in 10 employers are struggling to adapt to remote work, whether it be managing workloads, communicating with direct reports, or just having resources and equipment. It's tough stuff. 2 in 3 employers say that maintaining morale has been the most difficult. We all feel the burnout right now, and without face-to-face interactions or just the added hassle that is PPE, it's very complicated. And finally, nearly 75% of employers are operating with work from home limitations. With those statistics in mind, it's expected that mental health and engagement of your employees should be considered. SHRM is reporting 1 in 5 employees are feeling burnout right now. This year has brought huge disruptions to our professional and personal lives, and in return, we can see it play out in performance issues and turnover numbers. We don't want to lose sight of this. Take the opportunity to recognize and reward employees throughout the year, and if you're working with a benefits broker, engage them about their EAP or employee assistance program. A lot of EAPs ramped up this year to provide therapy and childcare options to support workforces. Don't let your employees struggle. Give them helpful resources to carry them into a successful 2021. The second consideration, work arrangement and telework. We're likely going to continue on the path of disruption to what work used to look like. Be proactive about considerations to telework and flexible work scheduling. Not every business model can allow for remote work options. I understand this, but as we see COVID cases spike, providing the option to work from home as opposed to putting employees on a leave to quarantine is a better option for productivity. If we learned anything from 2020, is that a lot of us are more than capable to do our jobs from home, at least part-time if we're in an office environment especially. We might also see the need for parents of elementary school-age kids to be home for childcare. Employers are playing an expanded role in their employees' financial, physical, and mental well-being. So support includes enhanced sick leave, financial assistance, and adjusted hours of operation. Three, communication and training. Even though it feels like there's an unprecedented amount of things happening right now and so many things to be aware of as an employer, just please be transparent with your employees and prioritize their development in 2021. With so much going on this year and so many employees being remote as recommended, we can't lose sight of how we talk to and what we do to progress our workforce's development. Both communication and training and development are a huge component of a happy, productive employee population. More likely than not, you might have to let 2020 pass you by without any technical or soft skill training. Managers especially need that training, especially on compliance, because they're likely going to be having some difficult conversation, especially surrounding COVID. Do not forget to ask the question, how can we support you when in doubt? And finally, the last of the 4 proactive HR consulting categories is workplace regulations and safety. We'll start with the elephant in the room, social justice and ethical challenges. Social justice and ethical challenges related to diversity and inclusion were heavily featured in the news media following several cases of systemic racism. Many employers have adopted expanded policies surrounding diversity, and I foresee this trend in diversity and inclusion to have an uptick in 2021. If you're thinking about why should I care about DEI, here's some reasons purely from an operational perception. DEI conversations expand ideas needed to innovate and respond to market changes. A diverse workforce is expanded talent. Another is to improve your employer brand. Be a pillar in your community and call attention to what you're doing to ensure diversity. And finally, the topic improves your succession planning capability because you'll have a breadth and depth of talent to move qualified people into critical positions. And if you're still thinking that systemic racism isn't happening at your place of business, note that a recent CNBC poll found that 61% of Americans believe racial inequality is a problem at work. Another study found that 71% of Black Americans have experienced racial discrimination or mistreatment. So if you haven't personally experienced heightened awareness inside your organization yet, certainly be thinking about it. The problem with DEI, though, is that mandatory training just doesn't work. Requiring people to take sensitivity training is just, it's not good for anybody. And it can be overall an uncomfortable subject to talk about. So here's what you can do to start. Recognize individual circumstances. Each person's situation may be different, and a one-size-fits-all approach to oversight may be counterproductive, and always make sure to react with empathy and transparency as well. Understand what characteristics, traits, contributions, behaviors, etc. are valued at your organization. If you have core values, always connect your strategy, policies, training, any type of HR administration or process to your core values. And if you don't have them yet, now's a good time to define core values. Also, include how you're addressing equal opportunity outside of just race and color. Obviously, we've talked about sensitivity in color and national origin and race, but understand too that other things about diversity should be included in your employee handbook. Every organization should have a statement on equal opportunity and sexual harassment, for example. And also be mindful that if you're over 15 employees, you must also address how your organization accommodates for disabilities under the ADA. Just like everything else, COVID, of course, complicates that accommodation process. So while we're on the topic of employee handbooks and company policies, if you don't already, you have to have something to update your handbook in 2021. Make that a priority. If it's been a while since you've updated your handbook, you certainly will need to do so because just in the year 2020 alone, sexual orientation was added as a protected class. So please be sure to include sexual orientation in your equal opportunity statement. All right. You might also want to consider how 2020 affected your paid time off and vacation policies. Do you want to have some type of temporary policy, maybe it's outside of your handbook, just a temporary policy to carry over more PTO into 2021 than normal? 34% of organizations are allowing employees to carry over PTO or vacation time or sick time, what have you, until the next year. There's no federal policy that mandates PTO, vacation, or sick time. Some states, however, do dictate some regulations, but in terms of federal policies, you have the option to, really be flexible here. And 18% of organizations that already made or will have made changes are, talking about how they're going to be changing, previous or future to COVID-19, because they just find out that, having a more flexible policy seems to work better for their organization. And finally, be aware of any relevant labor laws and CDC guidelines. The Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, as we talked about before, the FLSA, and corresponding state wage and hour laws are not on hold during the pandemic. In addition to FLSA obligations, decisions regarding wage and hour could trigger non-discrimination laws too. It could also trigger health and safety laws, leave and accommodation laws, and any other state-specific laws. So you have to be aware of any changes and requirements made by your local government or the CDC. By now, you should at the very least have a formal face covering and social distancing policy to be practiced inside your workplace. Note that a lot of federal employment law is dictated based on your employee count too. So as you grow in numbers, know that your threshold of which regulations you must follow do increase. And some takeaways. 2020 was all about transformation and working with little notice and fluid information. I don't suspect a less chaotic 2021, but that means growth is on the horizon too. Day-to-day tasks and priorities have been and will continue to be refocused. We will need to accommodate for these changes and how we will manage compliance, recruiting and hiring, and managing employees and workplace regulations. A fluctuating economy and the instability of the virus presents ongoing changes to regulations and a broader shift to remote work. It will continue to force organizations to increase the adoption of automation of technologies and cloud-based HR softwares, and probably permanently. We encourage you as a small business owner to be aware and get proactive about your HR administration for 2021. Thank you everyone for joining me today. I hope this content resonated as helpful, and as mentioned, I highly recommend searching the Ahola blog with specific topics, including revisiting the recorded 10-Minute Tuesday series. If you have any specific HR questions that I can assist you with, please email proactivehr@ahola.com with inquiries. In addition, I also send a biweekly Q&A email. It's called HR Inspire. I answer commonly asked HR questions every other week, so I'm happy to add you to that distribution list if you're interested in learning more HR best practices. Again, I appreciate your attendance today, and I wish your business success as you plan for HR compliance in 2021.